They almost never noticed her. That was the point. The diner sat at the edge of a 2-lane highway in the Kentucky dark, its neon sign buzzing half dead, the letters for open flickering like a heartbeat that couldn't decide. Inside, the air smelled of coffee scorched onto the burner and bacon grease gone cold. And in the corner booth, 4 men in matching hunting jackets were laughing at the waitress. She was maybe 50, thin in the way that comes from work and not from vanity. Her gray-streaked hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She carried a tray of coffees with both hands, steady as a level, and one of the men, the loud one, the one with the gold watch, had just knocked into her elbow on purpose. Coffee sloshed. It burned her wrist. She didn't flinch. "Careful, sweetheart," the man said, and the others howled. "You want to keep that job, don't you? At your age?" She set each cup down without a word. She did not argue. She did not hurry. And in the booth by the window, a man in a wheelchair went very still. He was younger than the hunters, maybe 40, one leg ending above where a boot should be, a service dog lying at his wheels, a German shepherd, dark-muzzled, wearing a working vest gone soft with age. The man had been watching the waitress fill his water glass. Now he was watching her hands, watching the specific, economical way she moved. His own hand had drifted up to his shirt pocket and had stayed there, frozen, pressing something flat against his chest. His mouth opened. No sound came out. The dog lifted its head off the floor. "Before we begin, wherever you're watching from tonight, whatever town, whatever hour on the clock, I want you to do something small. Subscribe to this channel. This story is about the quiet ones, the people who carry the heaviest weight of all and never once ask you to notice. If you believe those people deserve to be seen, then stay with me, and let's watch what happened in that diner together." Now, back to the highway, and the woman who wouldn't flinch. Her name was Delia Marsh, and she had built her entire life around not being remembered. She worked the closing shift at the Blue Fork Diner because the closing shift was quiet. Truckers came and went. The occasional family, the occasional drunk. Mostly it was her and the hum of the coolers and the slow drip of the coffee she made. Too strong because she liked it that way, and there was no one left at night to complain. She had a routine, and the routine was armor. At 4:00, she tied on her apron, double-knotted so it wouldn't come loose. At 4:30, she wiped down every table even though the day girl swore she'd already done it, because Delia trusted her own hands more than anyone else's. At 5:00, she rolled the silverware into napkins, 40 sets, and stacked them in a pyramid by the register. She kept peppermints in her apron pocket for the kids who came in cranky. She kept a small first aid kit taped under the counter that the owner didn't know about, because you never knew. And Delia was the kind of person who always knew where the nearest way to stop bleeding was. She noticed things she pretended not to notice. Which men kept their backs to the wall? Which cars idled too long in the lot? Which of her regulars had lost weight, the bad way, the grieving way, and needed their coffee refilled before they had to ask? The other waitresses thought she was strange, polite, reliable, but closed, like a house with the shades always drawn. She never talked about herself. When asked where she was from, she said, "Here and there," and smiled. And that was the end of it. But before that shift ended, the secret she had spent 6 years burying would rise up off the floor on 4 legs and walk straight to her. Here is what the men in the hunting jackets did not know. Here's what none of them could have known. Because Delia had spent every day since making sure no one would. Delia Marsh had once been Chief Petty Officer Delia Marsh, a Navy combat medic, a corpsman attached to a special operations unit whose name was still not written down in any place a civilian could find it. For 11 years she had gone where the worst of it happened. She had knelt in sand turned black with other people's blood. She had held pressure on wounds while the world came apart overhead, and she had said in a voice she'd trained to be calm the way you train a muscle, "Look at me. You're okay. Look at me. I've got you." She had gotten most of them home. Most. There was a night in a valley she still could not say the name of out loud. A night when the extraction was late and the enemy was close, and she had run out of everything but her own 2 hands. She had lost a man that night, a young one, and she had made a promise to another one. A promise she'd kept folded in her chest for 6 years, like a photograph gone soft at the creases. When she left the service, she did not go home to a parade. There were no parades for people whose war didn't officially happen. She came back to a country that looked at her and saw a tired, middle-aged woman, and she found, to her own surprise, that she preferred it that way. To be unseen was to be safe. To be unseen was to not be asked to remember. So she built a life small enough to hold. A one-room apartment over a hardware store. A closing shift. A cat named Sergeant who ignored her magnificently. She let the world believe she was no one, because being no one didn't hurt. And being who she'd been hurt more than the leg she'd been shot through in that valley. The leg she still favored just slightly. On cold nights, in a way only another wounded person would ever catch. The man in the wheelchair by the window had caught it. He'd come in around 9, rolling himself through the door backward to pull it open. The shepherd pacing beside him with the loose, easy watchfulness of a dog that had done this 1,000 times. Delia had brought him water and a menu, and had felt something go tight and cold in her stomach, the way it did when a piece of the past walked into a room. Though she didn't yet know why. She noticed the vest on the dog. Working canine, retired. She noticed the way the man's eyes swept the room once, fast, cataloging exits, before he let himself settle. The same sweep she did herself, every time, without thinking. She noticed the unit patch on his jacket, faded, the threads pulling loose, and she made herself not look at it directly, the way you don't look directly at the sun. She'd said, "Coffee, hone?" in the flat, friendly voice she used on everyone. He'd said, "Please, ma'am," and something in the ma'am, the particular weight of it, the reflexive respect of a man who'd been trained to give it, had made her hand tremble. Just once, on the coffee pot. Then the hunters had come in, loud and already halfway drunk, and the room had changed. They were local men with money, the kind who owned things and mistook owning things for being worth something. The one with the gold watch was named Cutter. She heard the others call him that, and Cutter had decided the way certain men do, that the tired waitress and the crippled man in the corner were there for his entertainment. It started small. A snapped finger for service. A complaint about the coffee sent back twice. Then Cutter had looked over at the man in the wheelchair, at the dog, at the empty, pinned-up trouser leg, and had said, loud enough to carry, "They let anybody in here, huh?" The shepherd's ears had gone flat. Delia had stepped between the booths, not fast, not obvious, just there, refilling a sugar caddy that didn't need refilling, putting her body in the line of sight. An old habit. Put yourself between the threat and the wounded. She hadn't even decided to do it. Her body had decided for her. 6 years out of practice and still faster than her mind. That was when Cutter had knocked the coffee into her wrist and called her sweetheart, and told her to be grateful for her job. I want to stop here for just one moment, because this is the part that matters. You have been in a room like this, maybe not this room, but a room where someone with more power decided to make themselves feel bigger by making someone else feel smaller, and where everyone else just looked at their plates. If you believe that the measure of a person is not the watch on their wrist or the noise they make, but what they carry quietly for other people, then type "never judge" in the comments below. Say it for Delia. Say it for every quiet person you've ever underestimated. And then stay with me, because the man in the corner is about to remember something. The burn on her wrist was already going red. Delia set down the coffee pot. She turned to go back behind the counter, and Cutter, feeling the crowd of his own friends, wanting more, said the thing that stopped the room. Bet she can't even read the menu she's serving. Look at her. Nothing. That's what nothing looks like, boys. The laughter came, and the man in the wheelchair spoke. He didn't raise his voice. That was the thing Delia would remember. In a room where the cruel man had been shouting, the wounded man spoke so quietly that everyone had to go still to hear him. "You need to apologize to her," he said. Cutter turned, delighted to have a new target. "Or what, hero? You gonna run me down?" He laughed at his own joke. His friends laughed harder. "What you're even doing out at this hour, huh? Shouldn't somebody be feeding you? Where's your medal, tough guy? They give you a medal for the leg." "Cutter," one of the friends said, uneasy now. "Come on, leave it." But Cutter had the scent of it. He rolled over the friend's words. He looked from the wounded man to the waitress and back, and something ugly and gleeful lit up his face. And he said, "What is this, huh? The cripple and the waitress. That your girlfriend? She your nurse? She looked like she's ever done a single hard thing in her. She saved my life." The room stopped. The wounded man wasn't looking at Cutter anymore. He was looking at Delia, and his hand had come out of his shirt pocket, and in it was a photograph creased and recreased until the image had gone soft, and his eyes were wet and shining and full of something that was not sadness exactly, but was older and deeper than sadness. "I didn't know," he said, and his voice broke on it. "I walked in here an hour ago and I looked at you and I thought, no, it can't be. She's gone. Everybody said she was gone." He was crying now, openly, the way a man cries when he has stopped being able to help it. "But it's the way you move. I'd know it anywhere. I dreamed about it for 6 years. You put your body between me and the door. You always did that. You did it just now and you didn't even know you were doing it." Delia stood very still. All the color had gone out of her face. "Ma'am," the man said. "It's you, isn't it? It's you." The dog rose off the floor. "Now, I need you to understand who the man in the wheelchair was, and to understand that, we have to go back to the valley Delia could not name. His name was Eli Brennan. 6 years ago he had been a 22-year-old on his first deployment, the youngest man in the unit, the one everybody called Kid because he still had the round face of the boy he'd been the year before. And on the night the extraction came late and the enemy came close, Eli Brennan had taken a round through the abdomen and another through the thigh, and he had lain in the dirt of that valley absolutely certain he was going to die. What he remembered, what he had told no one, because no one had ever believed the parts that mattered, was a woman's face over his in the dark. A corpsman, their unit medic. She had thrown herself down beside him with rounds still cutting the air above them both, and she had put her hands into the wound in his belly and held his life inside his body with the pure animal strength of her 2 arms, and she had said, "Look at me, kid. You're okay. Look at me. I've got you. You are not dying in this dirt. Do you hear me? That is an order." And then a mortar had come in close and thrown dirt and light and sound over everything, and when the world came back, Eli was being dragged toward a helicopter, and the last thing he saw of her was her silhouette going the wrong way, back into it toward the sound of another man calling for a medic. He'd been told later in the hospital that Chief Marsh had been badly wounded that night, shot through the leg dragging a second man to the bird. He'd been told she'd survived, and then he'd been transferred, and she'd been transferred, and the war had closed over both of them the way water closes over a stone, and he had never, in 6 years, been able to find her. He had looked. He'd written letters that came back. He'd been told, at one point, by someone who should have known, that she had died of complications a year after. He had grieved her. He had named his service dog after her. Not Delia. He hadn't known her first name then, only her rank and her call sign. He had named the dog Doc because she had been their Doc, the one who got them home. And now Doc the dog was standing in a diner in Kentucky, ears forward, whole body trembling with a recognition that ran deeper than anything a man could put into words. Because here's the thing about a working dog. A dog does not care about a watch or a wheelchair or 6 years. A dog remembers a scent the way we remember a mother's voice. And this dog, this old retired shepherd, had been at the Veterans Center 3 years back on the day a certain volunteer came through. A quiet woman who helped in the kitchen and never gave her name, and the dog had never forgotten her. And Eli had never known because the woman had left before he arrived that day, every day. Careful, a ghost who fed people and vanished. The dog crossed the floor. It did not run. It walked, stiff-hipped and old and certain, past Cutter, past the frozen friends, straight to Delia Marsh, and there in front of all of them, the German shepherd lowered its front legs and its head and knelt at her feet. The formal, deliberate bow a war dog is taught to give to only one thing in all the world: the handler who once saved its life, or the medic who once saved its unit. And it laid its graying muzzle against the top of her worn work shoe, and it let out a low sound that was not a growl and not a whine, but something that had been waiting 6 years to come out. Delia Marsh made a sound like she'd been struck. Her knees went. She caught herself on the edge of the booth, and then she was down on the floor in her apron, with her arms around the dog's neck, and the flat, friendly waitress voice was gone, and what came out of her instead was a name. "Sasha," she whispered. "Oh my God. Sasha. Good girl. Good girl. You made it. You made it home." Because she had named the dog too, you see. Back then, before it was Eli's. It had been the unit's dog, first, and she had pulled shrapnel out of its shoulder in a forward aid station with the same hands she used on the men, and she had called it Sasha, and she had wept over it the night they thought it wouldn't make it, and it had made it. And then the war had scattered all of them like seed on hard ground. Cutter was not laughing anymore. Cutter had gone the specific gray of a man who has just understood that he stepped onto something he cannot see the bottom of. Ely was wheeling himself forward, fumbling, the photograph still in his fist, and he pressed it into her hands where she knelt on the floor. She looked down at it. It was a photograph of 11 people in desert fatigues, squinting into a hard sun, a shepherd sitting in front of them with its tongue out, and there, third from the left, was a younger Delia, unmistakable, her arm around the shoulders of a round-faced boy who did not yet know what was coming for him. "That's you," Ely said. "Third from the left. Chief Marsh. Everybody said you were dead, ma'am. Everybody said." He was laughing and crying at once now. "And you're pouring coffee in Kentucky." "I couldn't." Delia's voice cracked. She pressed the photograph to her chest. "I couldn't go back to any of it. I couldn't be her anymore." She lost. She stopped. Her hand went to her mouth. "I lost Ramirez that night. In the valley. I had you both, and I could only carry one at a time, and I chose. I had to choose, and I've spent 6 years not being able to look at that photograph. And you kept it in your pocket, ma'am." Ely took her hand, the burned wrist gently in both of his. "Ramirez's mother has a folded flag, and she knows her son didn't die alone in the dark. She knows a medic stayed with him till the end. You gave her that. You did that. You don't get to carry it like it's a failure. You got 9 of us home. 9, Chief. I counted. I count them every single night." The diner was silent except for the hum of the coolers, and the low broken sound of 2 people who had thought each other dead, and Cutter. This is the part I want you to hold on to. Cutter did not slink out. He stood up, and his gold watch caught the light, and for a moment it looked like he might just leave the way men like him usually leave, without ever once saying the word. But something in that room had gotten into him. Maybe it was the dog. Maybe it was the photograph. Maybe it was the simple, unbearable arithmetic of a woman who had chosen which dying man to hold. He came around the booth. He stopped a careful distance away, and he took off his hat. This loud man, this owner of things, and he held it against his chest. And he said, in a voice that had lost all its noise, "Ma'am, I had no idea what I was looking at. I'm ashamed of myself. Thank you for your service. I mean it. I'm sorry." Delia looked up at him from the floor with her arms around the dog, and because she was who she was, she did not make him grovel. She just nodded, once, the way she used to nod at frightened men to tell them they were going to be all right. "It's okay," she said. "You didn't know. Nobody's supposed to know. That was the whole idea." But it wasn't the whole idea anymore. The year after that night went by, and it changed her the way a thaw changes a frozen field. Slowly, and then all at once, and then it was simply spring. Ely did not disappear back into the world the way the war had taught them all to disappear from each other. He got her number before he left the diner that night, made her write it on a napkin, made her promise, and he called her the very next day just to prove the number was real. Just to prove she was real. Just to hear the voice he'd grieved say hello. He was living 2 towns over. It turned out he'd moved there for the Veterans Center. The same center, the one with the kitchen, though neither of them had ever managed to be there on the same day. Sasha had been his service dog for 3 years. The dog had been trying to lead him to her. He'd swear it later. Every time they drove that stretch of highway, the shepherd would stand up and press her nose to the window as they passed the flickering neon of the Blue Fork, and Ely had never understood why until he did. They found the others. That was Eli's doing. Ely, who counted the living every night, now got to make the calls. One by one over that year, the 9 who'd come home out of that valley learned that their doc was alive. There were phone calls that dissolved into silence because grown men could not speak. There was a sergeant in Texas who drove 11 hours without stopping, just to stand in the diner doorway and salute her while she stood behind the register in her apron with tears running down her face, and the day girl staring, bewildered, having no idea that the strange, closed woman she worked beside had been all along the reason 9 families still had their sons. And Ramirez's mother came. That was the hardest one, and the one that healed the deepest thing. A small woman with silver hair and Ramirez's exact eyes, who drove up from Georgia with a tin of the cornbread her son used to write home about. the recipe he'd carried folded in his wallet through every deployment. She sat in the corner booth, Eli's booth, now the good one by the window, and she held Delia's hands across the table, and Delia finally told her the truth of that night. Not the sanitized version in the letters, the real one, that her son had not been afraid at the end, that he had asked Delia to tell his mother he was sorry about the truck he'd wrecked in high school. Of all things, a joke, a boy's joke, and that he had been smiling when he said it, and that Delia had held his hand and stayed until there was nothing left to stay for. Ramirez's mother did not cry the way you'd expect. She laughed, wet and shaking, at the part about the truck, because it was so exactly him. And then she reached across the table and untied the apron string that had come loose at Delia's neck and retied it, gently, the way a mother does. And she said, "You brought my boy home to me. You just did it with words. That's still bringing him home." They kept a chair for him after that. The corner booth, the seat by the window that caught the last of the evening light. The owner grumbled about the lost table for about a day until Eli explained it to him, and then the owner had a small brass plate made and screwed it to the wall above the booth. And it did not say anything about a war, because the war still officially never happened. It just said, "For the Wones WH did come home, reserved, a year to the week after that night." I want to leave you with a picture. It is evening at the Blue Fork Diner. The neon sign has been fixed. Eli fixed it. It turned out he was good with his hands, wheelchair and all, and now the whole word "open" glows steady and warm against the Kentucky dark. Inside, the corner booth is full. There's Eli, and there's Delia out of her apron for once because it's her night off. But she came anyway, she always comes, now, and there's a sergeant up from Texas and 2 others besides, and Ramirez's mother at the head of the table because that is her place now. And there is an empty chair by the window with a glass of water poured in front of it that no one will drink, and everyone understands. And under the table, gray in the muzzle and slow in the hips, and utterly finally at peace, an old war dog named Sasha sleeps with her head resting on the worn shoe of the woman she waited 6 years to find. Delia Marsh spent most of her life making sure no one would ever see her, and in the end it was a dog who couldn't be lied to, who couldn't be fooled by an apron, or a quiet shift, or a name given up on purpose, who walked across a room full of people and knelt down and said in the only language it had, "I see you. I always saw you. You are not no one. You never were." If the story moves something in you, if you've ever been the quiet one in the room, or if you've ever loved a quiet one and known the weight they carried without a word, then subscribe and stay with us. This channel is a place for them, for the ones who carry the heaviest things and never ask to be seen. We'll keep telling their stories, one at a time, until every last one of them gets the moment Delia got, the moment someone finally kneels down and says, "I know who you are." Good night, and thank you for sitting with us a while.